great.
Excellent. Okay,
Wow.
so before we begin with Sabrina, I want to give a shout out to someone in the audience. I don't know where they are because we can't see, but Miriam, your mother, is in the audience.
There she is.
Yes, yay!
Hi, Mom.
Okay, so let's start there. Let's start with inspiration. So what inspired you to become a humanitarian?
I think you hit the nail on the head pretty accurately there. My mom is a huge inspiration in my life, so I'm so happy that she's here. But she's generally always there. She's on all my field visits. But you know, it was her sort of humanitarian spirit, her work in philanthropy, and you know, her sort of carrying on this importance of giving back and giving back to Africa, the continent as a whole, actually, that really inspired me and my now husband, even to particularly get into EFAD, because we would not have known what EFAD was, believe it or not, if she hadn't told me. Because, you know, agriculture isn't necessarily the first thing that comes to mind when you're thinking of how do I give back and how do I do something meaningful. So she's definitely been a big part of that educational curve.
That's amazing. So let's dig a little deeper into EFAD. So tell us about your experiences and what you do, where you visited, the people you meet.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, EFAD, I think, is one of the world's best kept secrets and one of the UN's best kept secrets because, unfortunately, because it is in the agricultural sector, it doesn't get, I think, the spotlight that it deserves. But EFAD, the International Fund for Agricultural Development, looks at helping rural people out of poverty by giving them a means to work, and that work is through the land, cultivating the land and being able to grow their own food and take care of themselves, which I think is absolutely so important when you're looking at weaning people off the aid model particularly, which, you know, I think there's a time and place for aid, but I think everyone deserves to have work and to be able to take care of themselves, and I love the model for what it is. And it also integrates a lot of the issues that I care about, like gender, because when we're looking at smallholder farmers and rural people, actually women make up a really, really large majority of that. So, you know, helping women, but also helping climate, because I believe rural people are the custodians of this planet. They protect the biodiversity of the region. They know the land better than anyone else. So I think they are the face of climate change as it stands. So being able to support an agency that supports them directly and that spans, it has a global mandate, I mean, throughout the world, has just been one of the most fulfilling things I've ever done. And I'm absolutely proud to be a UN Goodwill Ambassador for them.
That's amazing. That's incredible. So, you know, part of our festival is about technology. So how do you think technology is changing global agriculture? And is it a force that can help with EFAD and with these rural areas and these with poverty and with hunger?
Absolutely. Tech should never be ignored, particularly in the agricultural sector. It reminds me, we were just doing this visit, and there was this woman who had been using sort of a rain gauge. And I don't know if you know what that is, because I had no idea what a rain gauge is. And she'd been coming to the same place every day to measure the rain in the region so that she could send these reports to the greater news networks of her region to be able to say, look, we've got this much rain today and that much rain tomorrow, and also so that scientists could, you know, look at the effects that climate change was having in that particular area. But just examples like that. And also farmers, I mean, how do you farm without knowing what the weather's going to be?
Of course.
You absolutely cannot. So finding new ways to you know, keep them up to speed, but also to communicate with the farmers directly. And I know EFAD has this great initiative called Farm Africa, because I hear a lot, well, how do you know what the farmers actually want? And how do they communicate their needs? But having radios set up and things like that to be able to supply people in the agricultural world with tech is so important.
That's amazing. That's fantastic. And I agree with you. Tech will help us to change the world and to change hunger. Talk to us about empowering women, because that's also a passion of yours.
Absolutely.
Yes. So
yeah. I hope it's a passion of everyone's, by the way.
It should be, absolutely, without question. But tell us about your personal experiences around that.
I mean, definitely, again, a lot of that strings from my mom. And I was having this really interesting conversation with someone the other day saying, you know, it's so important that we teach young girls, young women of color, any young girl, that they are beautiful, that they're important. And I was saying to my friend, you know, my mom came to the country as an immigrant and spent so much time trying to survive. So pardon us if it wasn't in the forefront of her mind to try and educate that on us, but she was struggling herself. And now I see the utmost importance of empowering women, and I've seen her be empowered by the work that she's done. And I just think carrying that on, the effects that it has, when you empower a woman, you empower a nation. And when you give a woman means to take care of herself, she takes care of the whole family. She takes care of the community, as I've seen my mom do growing up. And I'm so passionate about women and girls and so happy to have found this sort of bridge that can kind of interconnect all the things I do care about and still champion women and girls, because I meet the most amazing people you would not imagine on these trips. And I grew up, you know, in a time where there was all these commercials on TV of Africans needing aid, and there was this misconception that rural people don't work hard, but they absolutely do. And I'm so thankful to be able to share their stories with people after I do field visits and such, to show that, look, they're just looking for an investment. They're just looking for someone to go, great, let me invest in you because you will do the work. And I think women and girls are always at the forefront of that. Sorry, guys.
I couldn't agree more. And you know, as a board member of Elevate, I'm proud to say that Elevate's board is, there's more women than men, which is amazing. One of the best parts.
Great.
And Elevate has always been about empowering women and women in tech, which is great. Shout out to Elevate. But let's get back to you. So there's a great segue, because let's talk about entrepreneurialism and how you're taking your activism and turning it into a business. So let's talk about Sable.
I know, I can't believe I'm a woman in business. That
Yes.
actually feels really cool to say now. Eva, funny enough, I mean, this is gonna sound so biased, but it was one of the reasons that we wanted to start the skincare brand that we have now, which is called Sable Labs, in the way that we did. And I started it with my husband about 3 years ago in the middle of the pandemic. We were feeling isolated from everyone, as is probably everyone in this room was, you know, and we thought, okay, community is such a big part of wellness, but it doesn't get spoken about enough. And also, as a person of color, I wasn't looking at the wellness sector, as you may call it, as something that appealed to me or spoke to me. So we wanted to start a brand that not only spoke to those values, but also spoke to the sourcing issue in the beauty industry. And looking at farmers, because we work with farmers all the time, we thought, okay, how do we encourage big brands to connect with farmers and small-scale farmers to be able to source the ingredients that they want in a way that you know, protects the land, but also protects the people.
Yes.
Because people don't speak enough on the impacts of the beauty industry. For instance, in the shea category, I mean, women are abused around the world cultivating shea for beauty products. And I think that's such a shame, because it's a conversation that can strengthen so many smallholder farmers and so many people. I mean, even local farmers in Canada, right? There's farmers everywhere.
Absolutely.
So I think being able to start that as a conversational piece in the beauty sector felt like, why has this never been done? And I'm so proud to be able to incorporate that into a brand that we really care about, that looks at wellness through community and speaks to people of color, and is genderless as well. So I'm super, super proud to be a woman in business now.
That's fantastic. That's amazing. So let's dig a little deeper into Sable. So explain a little bit from the business model how Sable supports the community where the ingredients are derived from.
It wasn't easy.
Okay.
I'll tell you that, because the infrastructure isn't necessarily set up for someone in a rural community in, say, Ghana, to be able to send out moringa, to fill out safety sheets, to put together DHL forms, to irrigate products. The infrastructure isn't necessarily there. So it took us, you know, it was probably the hardest part of what we did. So as much as I'm saying it like it sounds easy, it was not easy. My mom actually had to go to Somalia to find a farmer who was cultivating qasal, help him fill out the safety sheet so that she can then ship it to our lab in London. Like, I mean, it was a whole thing. So I think it's important that somebody do it or try to do it, because it gets the conversation going. I understand, obviously, it's not going to be easy for small businesses necessarily to do that. I mean, we are a family-run business, but we're obviously in a much more fortunate position to be able to take the time to do that appropriately. But I hope, if anything, people just seeing that it can be done will start the conversation, especially for other beauty brands, because it's such a shame when you hear about the sourcing issue. And I just think for the longevity of products, nobody wants to know that ingredients are being sourced in a way that is toxic to people or the environment. So consumers are waking up to that, and I think brands will eventually have to turn and realize that it's not going to affect the bottom line, actually, if you do good, because people want you to do good, and then they will support you. But it wasn't easy. So if that's a really long-winded way to say that it was quite difficult.
No, it's a great answer. So let's go back in time a little bit. So raised in Canada, from relatively humble beginnings. Born in Canada, and now international humanitarian spokesperson, woman entrepreneur, like that's a massive journey. So tell us a bit about some of the challenges to go from humble Canada to international humanitarian and business person.
Oh my God, excuse my imposter syndrome for a moment then. But I'm so proud to be Canadian. And I hear, like, this is so true. Anywhere I go, everyone's like, Canadians are the nicest people. I'm like, I know. We are the nicest. And it's true. It really holds so much weight. Like, I think, being from a country that obviously is not perfect, but feels like it speaks to so many of the issues that I see around the world when I'm traveling, it means so much to me. So, also, I don't know if you know, but Canada's been a large supporter of EFAD,
Yes.
which I'm also quite proud to say that we've engaged those conversations. So we've had ministers on our side. They've supported the crisis response initiative after the war. They also, supported us early on in the days of COVID when the pandemic was obviously stalling all of the efforts of so many different agencies around the world when it comes to just supporting people in general. So I'm proud that Canada has given back. There's so much more work to do. I hope that Canada, steps up a little bit further, because what I do think, and on that same regard, where people say, oh, Canadians are so nice, we kind of need to keep that reputation up with our pockets as well, especially in, development aid. And I think being a leader and setting a bar for other countries is so important. So how did I get to where I am now? I mean, there was this actor.
No, it's not. You can't blame him.
Well, he was a bit of a tornado, and kind of went, let me just turn your life around. But I'm thankful, because obviously I've been blessed recently with so much more opportunity and so much more platform. And I'm going to be honest, when I initially sort of, fell into the spotlight, or whatever you want to call it, I didn't want to speak out. I didn't want to, because I thought people were like, she's just his wife. Who is she to speak out of it? And actually, because I come from such a strong family who support everything I do and want me to speak out, I was like, you know what? I'm going to use this platform. And I think the strongest thing you can have in this world is your voice. And I hope that no one ever takes that away from anyone in this room. And even if you feel your opinion doesn't matter, it always matters. And I feel I've been able to achieve so much of the work that I do in the philanthropic sector because I care that my voice matters, and because I believe that my voice matters. So hopefully that explains a little bit of it.
And you've proven that your voice matters.
Oh,
absolutely. One of the big things about Elevate is we really want to inspire youth, and we want to inspire, kind of at-risk populations and women and so on and so forth. So a big part of our DNA is sort of a startup DNA, but not startup just in tech, but just startup taking leaders and innovators and moving them up the chain. So what's your advice to young women out there, women of color and so on, in the audience, listening online? What would you tell them is the most important thing? How do they get to that next level?
Actually, I'll just say the first thing that comes to mind, because I think we've created, as a global community, I think we're all sort of responsible for this, a world where it can sometimes be difficult to project or give an opinion without being criticized so heavily. And I think if I hadn't have had that ability as a young person, without the forums like Twitter and all that, to be able to express myself freely, and then for someone to say, hey, let's shift that conversation, because actually maybe you didn't know this and I don't think that's correct, and to be able to have that debate in a healthy way, I think that sort of being at risk is actually detrimental to young people, because you have to be able to speak about what you care about in a way that you learn, because you've made a mistake. So to be able to create that forum and spread that is so important, and I hope that young people listen a bit more understandably, maybe is the right way to put it, to people who might have differing opinions. And I think that's something that we all need to take part in.
I think that's an excellent answer. Thank you.
Oh, nice.
So what's next? What like, you're young, you're here.
Oh, I'm not so young anymore.
Oh,
but I
yes you are.
appreciate
And you have huge future. You have a platform, you have a stage. What do you do with it?
I'll keep speaking until no one listens.
I think the audience is going to get bigger, not smaller.
I appreciate that. Philanthropy is at the heart of everything I do, and I see myself. I'm actually going back to school in international development, which I don't know how I'm going to manage that, but because I want to be more engaged in the conversation, I want to carry the weight when I sit in the rooms that I do, because I am so thankful to have a seat at the table. So I don't want to stop this journey. I actually have no idea where I'm going to end up, but I feel that it'll be somewhere that sits right with my heart, and that's the legacy that I want to leave behind, is that I gave back more so than, I was fortunate enough to design a pair of shoes, or have some beautiful pictures at shows, or I want to be remembered for giving back. So whatever paves that way.
That's amazing. That's incredible. So I want to go back a little bit, because we glossed over the travel aspect of EFAD and what you're doing on the continent of Africa. So do you have a story or a couple of stories you could tell us about, people you've met or villages you've gone to that really touched your heart, that really made a difference when you got back on the plane and thought, oh my God?
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to pick one specific moment, but if I had to choose, and I was saying to you earlier, the field visits that I get to do with EFAD, I also sit on the board for Conservation International, and I co-chair the board for Global Citizen in Europe. So I get to do a lot of field visits, but that's the part that I love. It's to see and meet the people that you're advocating for, and to hear their thoughts and what they have to say, because I think, I'm so thankful to be of the continent, but I still have not lived in the continent to be able to understand holistically the problems that so many people face. So I think it's really important for any ambassador or any advocate to be able to have conversations with the people that they're supporting intimately. But if I have to pick one story, I remember, and this is actually our first EFAD field visit, we had gone to Sierra Leone to look at the effects that the Ebola pandemic had in the region and how it had affected the people in the agricultural space there. And this is before COVID. So looking at these effects, speaking to people, talking about a pandemic that hadn't been spoken about as much as it should have been, in my opinion, and hadn't been supported in the same way that we'd seen with the COVID pandemic, obviously, because it was affecting a small little region in Africa,
yes,
unfortunately. But to be able to speak to the people there and hear their needs, and this woman, Isatu, in this small little village, and the village name is escaping me, just outside of, I can't actually even remember what region we were in, because we were in so many different places, but she was like, this pandemic I wish had been taken more seriously, because it had affected so much of our livelihoods. Her husband had left her. She couldn't afford to get her children to school anymore. And EFAD was actually the last organization standing, which is one of the reasons that I was like, this is an organization to support, because as you can imagine, it was Ebola, so many people fled. And then to be able to keep that in our minds going into the COVID pandemic, that was life-changing for me. So when we had launched the initiative just after COVID and tried to get governments and countries to come on board, we were championing that cause like nobody, because we had just seen what a pandemic can do to rural people. So, I'm so thankful. I wouldn't have had that necessarily if I didn't go on that field visit. And I think that's part of the reason I believe it's so important. But I also think, those are the stories that stick with you, the people's faces, their names, and just also hearing that the work you're doing is making a difference. Because at the end of the day, you want to know and believe that, okay, you can sit in all these board meetings and you can have all these bilaterals and you can speak to government after government, but if nothing's being done on the ground, what's it all for?
So you brought it up, so I'm going to have to ask the question,
Yeah.
but you brought up the word government. And what's interesting right now is it seems around the world our governments are very divided, and we're very right or very left. And what's interesting is when you think about a topic like global hunger and agriculture, we're all human beings. We all need food to survive.
Absolutely.
We all need agriculture to keep prospering on this planet. So how do you get the governments to pay attention? Because it seems today they want to talk about money and military and fighting with each other and so on. So do you find that a challenge? And how do you make this become a bigger issue?
I say they're slightly distracted. Food and food systems and food security is something that affects everyone on this planet. We saw the effects of inflation. We saw during the pandemic when people were scrambling and grocery store shelves were empty. If we don't have food security, the system is so sensitive, it can collapse so readily and so easily. So I hope that, first of all, everyone in this room, if you care enough to come to a festival like this, you understand that at least. Now, do I think government is going to come around and understand it so hastily? When you look at the issue with climate change, that's kind of a problem that's been sidestepped quite a bit, that we're probably running out of time. My watch is on the other hand. So no, what I do think, though, is people have the power, everyday people have the power to speak up and show governments that that's what's important to us. So I would actually put it less on the changing leaders and put it more on everybody in this room and telling people you know and caring about the issues and voting, because yes, voting still carries so much weight. When I hear statistics like less than half of the people in the US actually vote, like, wait, what? That's mental to me, because how else are you going to use your voice? And how are we then going to write a blog entry about, oh, well, I really care about that, and then not speak up and use it by something as simple as a vote? So I'm going to look more to the people, and I'm going to put my faith more in them.
Wonderful, excellent, and I agree. We all have voices. We have to use them, and we have to use them by voting. Our time is up with Sabrina. I wish it wasn't. She's amazing to listen to and incredibly inspirational. We thank you so much.
And how great is he?
No,
Thank you.
no. This has been amazing. So to Sabrina, thank you so much.
Thanks so much. Thank you.